Oh, hey, Dave Hunt here, owner of GameMasters Guild. Welcome back to The Art of the Master. And in this episode, I'm going to take a quick look at improvisation. And basically, all that is coming up with stuff on the fly. Now, you usually have to improvise when basically your players decide they want to go west instead of east. They're in a dungeon and they go left instead of right. Or they decide to turn around completely and head back out because they think it's too dangerous. Or they might even decide whatever the quest is too dangerous, too complicated, too boring, too annoying, too political, too railroady. So they say, we don't want to go that way. This is a giant world. We should be able to go wherever we want. And they're not wrong. Although this places an incredible burden upon you. So I'm going to give you some quick tips and tricks in a short amount of time on how to alleviate this freedom. And I'm not talking about railroading your players into one specific way and telling them they must follow this path, but I'm going to give you some ideas that hopefully will help guide you and help alleviate your frustration when they do want to go in a completely different direction. So, let's go with the intro, and I'll be right back with improvisation. Okay, so your players have decided to not participate in the quest you've designed. For whatever reason, they don't like it. Maybe they're too wary, maybe they're too nervous, maybe they don't feel they can do it, maybe they just don't like the idea of this complicated political kingdom infighting that you've got set up, or maybe they just don't want to go fight a really big dragon because they're probably going to die, or they don't want to get a cursed whatchamajigger from some kind of swamp of death. And I can't blame them. So, here's what I think. Now, whenever players decide they want to go sideways, typically in my game, it's not because they're trying to throw a wrench into my plans, but they really legitimately want to see what else is out there. And sometimes they're just not interested in what I got. Hey, when I watch TV, I'm not always interested in the episode of my favorite TV show. I watch it because I can, but I can take it or leave it, and sometimes I leave it. And players are the same way when it comes to role-playing games. So if your players decide to not follow the path you've laid out before them, don't panic. That's one of the biggest things that you have to remember to do. And that is, don't panic. Your players say, oh, we don't want to go that way. You say, okay, not a problem. Where do you want to go? What is interesting for you? Let me know so I can check my notes, and that way we can proceed with the game. Let me know where you want to go. But don't tell the players you don't have anything. This is very, very important. You don't never, ever want to let the players see you sweat. Now, even in my games, even amongst my close friends, they still kind of like to see how far they can push it. And every now and then I say, man, guys, I just don't have anything. And that's okay, too. But more often than not, excuse me, more often than not, I'm ready for whatever they got in store. Because it's pretty simple to keep a game entertaining until you can play catch up with what other players are doing. So first of all, let's take a look at whatever it is they're ignoring. Well, here's the thing. If you wanted them to go to a certain kingdom, let's say in the east, and they say, well, we're not interested in going there. We want to go to this other kingdom in the west. You say, okay, not a problem. Probably one of the easiest things you can do is take all the information you had for the kingdom in the east and apply it, and now it's the kingdom in the west. If it's something you made up completely off the cuff and they hadn't even been there yet, it's not really a problem. They don't know any better, so there you go. Your problem's solved. However, that's kind of a hammer fix. And it's not as nice as actually having something prepared in the west. But what you can do is that, let's say you want them to travel east to a certain kingdom, and like I said, they decide to travel west, so you take that information for that kingdom in the east and basically make it completely opposite. So let's say the kingdom in the east is very open to races of all kinds. Well, the one in the west, make them not. Maybe the kingdom in the east it has no magic whatsoever. They're not familiar with magic users. There's not a lot of magic for purchase, but maybe in the West it is. Maybe there's more guilds and different types of guilds in the kingdom in the West versus the East. Make it opposite. So anything you have written down, you can just automatically go, oh, I'll just do the opposite. Maybe there's one major inn, the kingdom in the East, but maybe in the West, they're highly competitive. So there's a lot of really nice inns, and they're all big. So right there, you can immediately take what you had planned, make it something completely different, but it's super easy because you just made everything completely opposite. And the players don't know because they're not looking at your notes. And then if you have to, you just jot down names as you go. And I'm never afraid of if a player says, what's the name of this tavern? What's the name of this inn? What's the name of this guy I'm talking to? Or they just straight up ask the NPC as they're talking to him, hey, what's your name? Sometimes I say, what do you think a good name is for him? Don't be ashamed. It happens. I can't think of names all the time on the fly. So sometimes it doesn't hurt to say, hey, why don't you give me a good name for an NPC? And if a player says, I'm going to call him Joe Bob, I'm going to say, no, Joe Bob's not good. How about Johan? Yeah, we'll call him Johan or Johan or something like that. I'm not going to let him name something silly like that. But you get the idea. So take something you have planned in one area and make it completely opposite wherever it is they're going. And then if you have trouble with names, ask your players. Sometimes I might even say, hey, if you're looking for a certain inn or a tavern, have you heard of one before? What do you think a cool name is? I let them rattle off because sometimes that helps me and takes a little pressure off me. Okay, so that's one thing you can do right there. And that's a pretty easy trick to do. And actually, technically, I gave you two. One is you just rehash whatever you had planned in one area, in another area. Like the Kingdom in the East, you just basically photocopy it and put it in the West now because the players don't know what they're missing because they're not going that way. Or you take and everything you had planned for the Kingdom in the East, you just make it the completely opposite, maybe with a few tweaks, in the West. Easy peasy. Pressure's off you. But remember, you got to take notes. And quick notes too. You don't have to write giant gobs and gobs and gobs of background and backstory and why suddenly this kingdom's named a certain way. You don't have to worry about that. Just make some quick notes. Now another thing you can do is, let's say players want to go a certain direction. Oh my gosh, you don't have anything planned. So they're going off to the West because they don't want to go to the East. Okay, so what's involved in traveling? Let's take a look at that. Just because the players leave their starting point and go in the completely opposite direction doesn't mean that they're right there just like that. Now, there's travel time involved. So they got to hoof it on foot, or they got to ride their horses or get passage to wherever it is they're going. Now, if they're going by sea, this isn't going to matter either. So wherever they're traveling to, at some point, they're going to have to stop and take a break. If they're on foot, if they're in a caravan, if they're riding on a horse, they're going to have to stop and make camp, which is great because it sets you up for the opportunity to, if they're riding with a caravan or traveling with other NPCs, maybe a little RP on the way. Or if the players are just by themselves, you can easily make them break for camp. And in the middle of the night, all right, who's going to take watch? Basically, who's going to secure the camp? Who's going to stay awake for a few hours and watch camp while everyone else is sleeping? And then who's going to switch out and continue to watch camp while everyone else is sleeping? And players usually like to do this in about 2 to 3 hour segments. And usually, if you do it that way, usually everybody generally gets enough sleep for a long rest and gets enough game time to actually do the watch portion. And during the night, you can make everybody who's having or on watch, you can make everybody roll to see if something happens during their watch. And if it does happen, it doesn't have to be one guy runs out and attacks them or a big monster attacks them. It doesn't have to be like that. You can take your time and build it up. Oh, you hear a noise or something out there. What can I see? I don't know. Even if you have dark vision or torchlight or magical light, most of that stuff for players is going to end about 120 feet out anyways. If you are out in the darkness looking in at a camp with a fire going, it's going to be a lot easier to see all those players out there, even if I'm just a human with no vision. So I could easily, 1 or 2 humans could easily sit out there in the darkness and start attacking that camp with crossbows. or short bows or long bows. And I'd even be willing to try to disadvantage and get that longer distance so I'm out of sight of whoever's there. And so maybe if me and my buddy are shooting, it's going to be harder on the other players. Now, from the player standpoint, they're sitting there at camp and they're getting attacked by crossbow bolts or arrows, and so these bad guys are shooting at them. The players aren't going to know because it's completely dark out there and it's beyond their ability to see. They're not going to know where these attacks are coming from. And they might be able to gauge it roughly. Oh, it's coming from the south. Oh, it's coming from the north. But they're not going to be able to see because those guys are hidden in the darkness. So that's going to be kind of interesting. Now, I point this out because basically what happens is all I'm doing is I'm doing some travel time. I'm eating up game time by letting them travel. Maybe make a couple nature checks or whatever, or a survival check to find food and water, describe it a little bit. The game is still going. I still don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm running through all these motions and the players are progressing in the world and they're doing things they would expect their characters to do. So you're eating up some time and buying some time for you to think of stuff and it's still giving your players a good time. And they sit and they camp. By the time everybody does what they want to do, they cook and everything, and they figure out who's going to take watch, and then these guys attack them later on someone's shift. Someone's going to get it. And then they have combat. Now they got a problem to solve, and they're at a great disadvantage because these guys, even though they're shooting at disadvantage at them, they're hidden deep in the darkness. So the players really got to work to try and get these two guys. And combat always is a great way to eat up some time and to buy you some time to come up with what you're going to do. Now, once the players resolve this combat, let's say with these two bandits hidden in the dark, are they connected to the bigger plot? No. Not everything that happens in your game needs to be connected to some kind of giant meta plot. Not everybody happens to be out to get the players just because they're those characters from the other town that did XYZ. No. Sometimes bandits are just bandits. Sometimes it's just two guys trying to make a buck off some guys, and that's it. So combat eats up a lot of time, and let them do that. And of course, the players will probably be kind of wired, and they'll check for other things, or they'll see if they'll question the bandits. Maybe they'll let them go. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll win them over, or the bandits will win the players over. I don't know. There's all sorts of things. Maybe the bandits will search the bodies if they kill them, and they'll see if there's got any markings or insignias or anything like that, and ask questions about, well, how are they dressed? Is that how the people dress out in the West or the East? Or, can I tell if they're prior military? Players are going to ask all sorts of questions, which the less you say and the more players say gives you more information to reel in and use for later. However, if you say, why, yes, because let's say Kilgore is a barbarian, right? Or better yet, we'll say Kilgore is a fighter. He's one of the player characters. He's one of the fighters. So Kilgore takes a look at this bandit's remains, and you tell him that he finds an insignia. And he's like, well, I'm a mercenary veteran, so what do I know about this insignia? I wouldn't even make him roll. Just because he's a mercenary veteran, that's his background, and he's a fighter, so I'm like, man, you don't even need to roll. The other guys in your group, they have no clue about this. It's a good thing that you're here. Playing to the player's strengths. And another reason why I don't require a roll, because I'm playing to his strengths. And that's important, because a player wants to feel like he's justified in the character that he makes. He wants to feel like his character is worth something. And by doing something, giving him a little extra nod to his character's background without requiring a roll or anything, is really uplifting and really makes you feel good. And it makes you feel good as a DM too when you do it, because you can see that they're digging it. So Kilgore finds this information, and he's like, oh okay. And you tell him that it's, oh yeah, in the West. You've seen this before in the West or the East or whatever direction you want to put it in. If you want him to go back to the East, you tell him that's where it is. But, I like to tend to, whatever direction they're going in, that's where I like to put that new thing. I don't want them to pay attention to what they came from, because I'm worried that anything I might do to get them back to the East, to my original story, might make them skeptical about going. So I want to wait till later to a more appropriate time to get them back to my original story. And that's even if we end up following my original story. Be prepared to throw away your original story and follow whatever new thing comes along. Because if the players are interested in it, that's where they're going to have the most fun, and that's where you need to go. I mean, if you got a story to say, you can work it in, but you can't just stone cold stop the players from what they're doing. So, you tell Kilgore, yes, this insignia is from another mercenary company. You've heard that they've traveled all over and do things, but they're mainly based out here in the West, right around near this kingdom that you're going to be going to. You don't know if they're based out of there, but you know they did a lot of activity in and around that area. And I'm like, oh, that might be interesting. Is it connected? Did someone hire these bandits to waylay the characters? The players don't know, but you do. If it was me, I'd say coincidence. But what's nice is you have that little tidbit of information so you can bring it up later. If the players get over to the West and they find that mercenary company and they start talking to people, maybe they'll say, oh, those guys? Whew, those guys were awful. We let those guys go. Yeah, they were part of our mercenary company, but we let those guys go. They stole from us, and they wouldn't follow orders, and they would kill people when we told them not to, so we let those guys go. I'm glad you took care of those guys, because those guys were bad. Okay, that's it. Nothing more, nothing less. But if you wanted to, you could make something out of it. And that's why you want to keep that in your back pocket. And that's why once they get to the West, maybe they don't run into that mercenary company. They ask and they say, oh yeah, those mercenaries were here, 6 months ago, but they've moved on since then. Okay. So you have a story tidbit that could be something later on down the road, but thankfully, because you keep kind of keeping it at a distance, your players are going to slowly wonder about it and ponder it, and you're going to see how much they're going to bite on it, how much they want to follow it. So that's something to consider right there. And again, it itself can be its own little small story. It can be no story, or you could later on use it to link to something bigger. Now, something else. Let's say they're traveling and, what are we going to do? We're going to have a random encounter at night. Let's say not bandits. Let's say it's a skeleton or two, just so they can have combat, just so they can fight something scary like a monster, right? A skeleton's pretty easy, especially for low level, or maybe slightly higher level if you throw in some extra hit points and add a couple extra points of AC. So skeletons come in, the players fight them, that's done. Now, a player could easily say, well, where'd these skeletons come from? Well, make a survival check. And then let them track the skeletons back to, let's say, a cave or some old ruins hidden deep in the woods or off deep in the prairie. But here's the thing. If they're going to track those skeletons back, don't make it a little ways off the road. Say they have to pack up, they follow, and they keep going, and they have to maybe make a whole another day's journey and another long rest before they can continue again and follow them even deeper out into the wilderness. That's a lot of tracking, I know. But, bits of rusty armor, slightly damp flat areas where they could see skeleton prints, or maybe they see other piles of skeletons that have already been defeated by somebody who's no longer in the area, or maybe wild animals attacked them or something. And eventually, you find a ruin, and in that ruin, maybe it looks like an old cave that leads into an old underground ruin, or it itself is an old ruin. Remember, it's a fantasy world, and we're talking about civilizations built upon civilizations. You could literally find an entrance to an old ruin on the side of the road. Players are sitting there camping, somebody's walking around, and all of a sudden, you hear a noise. Give me a check. What's wrong? Well, you hear something cracking and the grinding of stone underneath you. And give me a saving throw because you're going to take some falling damage. And it falls into a dungeon. Or at least a small dungeon. You don't want to make it epic, but you want to make it just small. Something so they have something to do. That's what you want to do. So they fall in it, or even, like I said, they have to track the skeletons for a few days, and they find this ruin, they go in. It could be as simple as a long corridor that branches off into two other corridors. And at the end of one corridor, it's completely collapsed, but the players can tell there's a draft, and they try to dig their way into it, but they can't. And going down the other way, maybe it leads to a small chamber, find a little bit of stray loot like a platinum piece, a couple pieces of copper, an old rusty dagger, or maybe a magic dagger +1 just laying there. And then down another corridor, maybe there's a trap that if they fail their saving throw, they step on it, it goes off, and the arrows shoot out the sides and immediately fall down to the ground because it's been there so long, the trap is almost useless. But it makes them think, and it changes their perceptions of the world. It's not this giant ruin, this giant dungeon, but it's definitely leftovers from another age. And the trap, been there so long, it doesn't even barely work, or it doesn't even hardly work. So that's kind of interesting, just something different. And maybe they keep going down that one corridor that actually goes somewhere, and it comes to an opening where they can't even see past it. It's like a bottomless pit. And you always want, these kind of dungeons to either have a entrance that goes down very deep, or over time, the passages kind of move down at an angle so you can get deeper and deeper underground. I like doing that kind of stuff. Or have them run to a staircase that goes down or something like that. And then have this great, vast, bottomless pit. And then deep down below, they can hear water rushing or a thunderous roar. You can just say a thunderous roar. Is it an underground river? You don't know. It's just a continual thunderous roar. So there's lots of little things you can do. And again, this dungeon does not have to be epic. You don't have to have lots of gold, lots of magic items. You don't have to have lots of dragons or anything like that. But, you could put a random creature here and there and there. And you mark it on the map, you take notes of it, and you make it something that players can maybe come back and take a look at later. Or maybe they're traveling, and from the road they see a tower, and that tower's always been there. And maybe if they run into anybody else, they say, hey, what about that tower? Oh, I don't know. Maybe people never go to that tower because they're always traveling from town A to town B, and sure, the tower's there, but people go by because maybe there's not a road to it. And even if there was, why would they go to a random tower if they don't have business there? And who's going to go looking for trouble? Most commoners, and even merchantmen and other nobles, they're not going to go looking for trouble unless they need to, unless there's a reason to go. So who knows? You might have hundreds of people pass by an old tower that's maybe barely half a mile off the road, and it's super easy to get to, but nobody goes there because everybody thinks the same thing. It's either A, a ruin, or B, it's someone's private residence. And a tower, man, who hasn't heard of a thing called a wizard's tower? So most people are just going to stay away. So that's something I want to consider too. It doesn't have to be in a deep, dark area of the forest where it's impossible to get to. It could literally be just off the road. And they could go there, and maybe there's nothing in that tower. Maybe the players could just move right in. I say, hey, you claimed it. You guys can move right in. Really? Yeah, there's nobody there. There's no roads. They check for traps. You could spend a whole evening just inspecting a 2 or 3 level tower from top to bottom, and maybe if you wanted to, throw a little secret, let's say a secret basement in there, like 1 level secret basement, and maybe there's like a small chest there that's open, and there's a few things laying around. Maybe they find a spyglass. It doesn't. I mean, that's like 1,000 GP in 5th edition, and that could be big bucks for them, especially if they're low level. But also, that's something like that could be very useful from the top of the tower to look around and see for miles. And that's kind of cool. Now, some GMs might say, Dave, I can't believe you'd give them their own personal tower, especially if they're low level, right out the gate. They got to earn that. Well, they just did. They're traveling, and they found it, and they earned it because, well, they're playing your game for starters, and it's interesting. It's something different. It's something they may not have had in another game. And I've played those games where you have to slog and slog and slog and scrimp and save, and it seems like it takes forever to build, a fortification or to hire people to do it or to find one or to clear one out. Give it to them. You're the dungeon master. Or what? A 3-story tower for 4 or 5 players is going to throw off your game? Oh no! It's so overpowered. They have a tower with a secret basement. Well, here's the thing. You give them something like that, you give yourself a couple days to think about it. Next thing you know, you got story connections. At any time, they could find something hidden in the tower that elaborates on the history of the tower. Or maybe there are deeper levels to the tower. Or maybe there's a portal that, certain time of the year, it opens up in the field next to the tower. Maybe, just for fun, you're bored and the players are out there investigating the land, and someone give you a perception check. Boom! They see something shiny sticking out of the ground. They go, they dig it up. It's a treasure chest with, like, I don't know, 100 copper, 100 silver, 200 gold, a couple electrum pieces, or maybe it's all electrum. Give them some money, give them some cash, let them get some horses, let them fix up the tower, And plus also, too, whose land is it? Maybe somebody claims that land. Maybe someone 100 miles away, maybe this is the edge of their land, and nobody knows. But it's right there, and the tower's at the edge of that land. So maybe someone's going to say, hey, you're squatting on my land, and show up with a big army once, whoever owns it figures out they're there. The guy says, hey, look, man, I'm the lord of this land, and you guys are essentially squatting. I didn't even realize this whole tower was standing here. But if you pay me, hey, you guys can have it and a chunk of, I don't know, 50 acres. Because if I own 100 miles of land, 50 acres ain't nothing. So maybe the players will have to use some of that money that they find to pay him off. And keep it easy. It doesn't have to be, not everybody has to fight to the death about everything. That's the only problem I have sometimes in fantasy games or any role-playing game, is somebody shows up and suddenly it's all about, let's draw swords and kill each other until we're all dead and see who's left over to get resurrected. It doesn't have to be like that. If I was a lord, not 100 miles of land in every direction, and I found some guy squatting in an old tower that I didn't even know was there, I'd be like, I'd show up and say, hey, you guys really aren't supposed to be here. This is my land, but, for a small fee, you guys can just have it, and they'll give you, 50 acres of land around it and do whatever you want. And they'll even give you a deed, and I'll even let you know a little bit of history about the land or whatever. Maybe I'll wine and dine you. I don't know, just something. Because you don't want a bunch of squatters on your land, do you? But it's just something to, basically it's just something to add detail to the world. And sure, every time you come up with something off the cuff like this, you gotta jot it down. But how easy is that, Players find abandoned tower. They're probably going to want to name it. Has secret basement, 3 levels. Gold, and you could just put somewhere, players find chest with map in it, or, players find a stone loose on the 3rd floor with, diary written in Elvish. Oh, that's cool, or maybe there's some spell scroll stashed somewhere. Who knows? There's all sorts of stuff, and you can always elaborate later. But just finding that something like this old abandoned tower, even if it's not connected to anything else, and they can just move in for free and never have any trouble with it, that's easily a session or 2 unto itself. It's so cool. And all you did was just give them a little bit of rope. And, man, they're going to run with it. Anything cool like that. Just little bits. Just throw out there, and you can easily make a session out of something like that. And that sounds boring. Oh, we're going to go explore an empty tower today. And everybody's going to be like, why? But when you throw it out there as a part of their travels, and they're just like, they stumble across it, it's different. It's a different perception. Like, well, can we go check it out? And you're like, well, if you want to. You are traveling to the West Kingdom, but if you want to take time and explore that old tower over there, you could. You don't know whose it is, but, or you could just leave it. But hang on, let me check. Flip some pages, Yeah, if you wanted to. And, when I look down at my notes and I flip through pages, the players, they don't know if you're actually referring to some of your notes, if you are adjusting some of the notes you just got done taking, or if you're, or if you got nothing there, or if you're really consulting notes. They have no idea. The important thing is your reaction. Oh yeah, there's a tower out there. There's a tower? Yeah, way in the distance out there, just sitting out there. There's not even a road to it that you can see. Really? Oh yeah. So you guys want to make camp? And then what I do is I'll immediately ignore things that I say. I might make it sound mysterious, or say, it could just be someone's old farm silo, or maybe a wizard's tower, an old ruin. You don't know. So anyways, so you guys camp. who wants to take watch? I need to know. There's some trees you guys can tie off the horses to, pretty easy. And a lot of times, if you ignore stuff you put in your game, players will sometimes be more interested in it than you anticipate. And I've had this happen before. And it's kind of neat. And a lot of times, I'll do multiple things. You say, well, you could see, let's say, players want to camp for the night. Well, there's a thick forest over there, and it looks like, and you might be able to find a decent place to camp over there, maybe out of the rain. There's that tower way over there, but man, that's probably someone's tower or an old farm silo. You don't know. Or, looks like just up the road, there's a little intersection with a little trade community there. It's like half a dozen buildings. You could go up that way. Or you could just sit here on the side of the road and camp. What do you guys want to do? Who's going to take watch? Where do you guys want to go? I give them 3 different options. The deep woods over here, the little trading post up the road with 6 buildings where you can tell there's a caravan there, or this old tower over there that might even be just a ruin. It might be someone's home. It might be a wizard's tower. It might be a grain silo, So the players now have not just 1 option, but 3 options. And actually 4, because they could go back the way they came. And so basically, what I'm trying to show you is as Game Master, always have some options available. Always be thinking. And remember, it doesn't have to be a lot, because you can build a lot off an awful little bit. Like I said, a random encounter with some bandits could end up being a major story later on, or just a curious thing that keeps popping up. Those skeletons that attack at night, you could easily say, oh, it looks like they came through the tall grass that way. So they came from someplace. Well, players love to know where things came from, and it might be a little further than they anticipate, but it's worth it. And plus, if they do go investigate something like the skeletons or the bandits, maybe the bandits have a hideout. Maybe there's more bandits. Maybe on the way to figuring out where the skeletons come from, there's another encounter with, let's say, a Periton flies out of the sky and attacks them. Whoa! Or there's a wolf pack that shows up. Or maybe they meet someone who's interested in trading. Or maybe a wizard pops out of nowhere and says, hey, does anybody want some healing potions? I got some for sale. I need some quick gold because I got to get back to my friends. All right, bye. All sorts of weird stuff. There's all sorts of things you can do. So just keep these things in mind. And it doesn't have to be these exact things, but just be prepared to take your players elsewhere. And more appropriately, be prepared to let your players take you elsewhere and be open to it. I mean, sometimes they want to split the party. Sometimes this is a great time for you to put some of these different options out there, because suddenly if they split the party and each party has 2 or 3 different options to explore, they're going to want to come back, meet up, figure out what to do, and then go with one of those options, or maybe 2, depending on how they are. Of course, it could cause a little more work on you, but it's completely worth it. And never lose your cool. Never let the players see you sweat. They say, hey, we're going to the West. You don't have anything planned for that, do you? Like, I'm the Game Master. I got everything planned out. If you want to go to the West, knock yourself out. And as a matter of fact, I'll just pull something out of my butt, and I'll literally tell them, oh, the West? Well, that doesn't bother me, because if you go to the West, there's this place. And actually, if you keep going further, there's a whole port town there, like Waterdeep, Baldur's Gate, or whatever town that you want to put there. There's even that place too, and they have a ship to wherever you can go. You have even heard that they have airships out there too. Really? Yep. And instantly I write down, I say, hang on a second, and I'll sit there and I'll write down about the town to the west that they're going to, and I just put opposite everything. Everything in the west is opposite everything that I had planned for the east, no problem. And then town beyond, Port City, whatever the name is, also has airships. Look at that. Like 3 lines of information will give you tons and tons and tons of things to work with. And I would probably write each location like Kingdom in the East, Kingdom in the West, the West Port. Each one is I would just write at the top of a page, and then each idea has its own page, so I got plenty of room to elaborate. And remember, any little thing you can do to catch the player's attention, go for it. Always combat. There's always random encounters, always mysterious things to be found. Cursed or lightly cursed, or maybe, let's see, what else? just curious ruins. And sometimes the pieces don't fall together until the players are somewhere else. And just because a player makes an incredible history check or any kind of roll doesn't mean that they have all the information in the universe and instantly know everything. They might roll a natural 20 and say, wow, that was great. This is all the information you get on a natural 20. So if you were somewhere where you could really research it, you could probably even get more information. So in the players, and I always tell the players there's more, there's something else extra, there's something else beyond. Sure, I gotta make notes, keep track a little bit, but it's not too much of a burden, but it excites the players. And later on, when you're at home resting, taking a break, and you're thinking about these things, and you got a few days between sessions, or maybe even a week, which is kind of typical, most games usually are weekly, then you can start putting stuff together and go, oh, I have a story here, but I won't lay it out in front of the players. I'll slowly start bringing things up, and I'll start connecting things lightly, and then as the adventure gets going, then you can really start connecting the pieces and making it bigger for the players and more exciting. And then at some point, you can say, oh yeah, that guy, well, even though you need to go to the port in the west here, let's say you need to go to Baldur's Gate, and that's where you need to get a ship to go to this other place you got to go to. But first, you need to go back to that kingdom over there in the east and talk to this guy, because only he can give you the information about the place you're going to go once you hit Baldur's Gate. So then you can finally get them back to the kingdom in the east and get them back to Baldur's Gate and then send them out wherever else they're going. So there's a lot of things you can do. And of course, I could sit and talk for hours about this kind of thing. And I did, actually. This video was originally going to be an hour and a half long. And I said, no, too much information. And quite frankly, you're not missing much. It wasn't that good. I rambled a lot. So I cut out a lot of the fluff and tried to be a little more to the point with this video. So hopefully I've put your mind at ease about improvising in your games. And quite frankly, you can do this whether or not you're homebrewing your own game or whether or not you've already got a pre-built module or campaign that you're running out of. Sometimes the players, they're just not in it and they want to go this way in a totally different direction. And either way, you're covered. You got to think on your feet a little bit, but whatever you do, don't let them see you sweat. Always be like, oh, the West, huh? Yeah, sure, if you guys want to, no problem. So you guys go about so many miles, and now who's got first watch? Just roll with it. Just roll with it. And odds are good that the players will give you more to go off of than any campaign module or anything you've come up with. And remember, it's interactive storytelling. And they're going to take you places as often as you're going to take them places. So, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them below in the comments. And for sure, I'm probably going to be coming back and talking more about how to improvise in your role-playing games. This is just a little bit of a taste. So again, I'm David Hunt. Thank you for joining me for another episode of The Art of the Master. And I want you to stay safe, play great games, and I'll see you real soon.